prayer.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
I'm not introducing myself again. Welcome to GRCNA 39, One Fellowship, One Family. Our intention for this convention is to make available to our fellowship a weekend of recovery, celebration, and fun. We hope that all addicts receive the NA message of recovery while they are attending this event. It is our hope that the message we carry may truly let all individuals know that NA is a place to recover, and no addict seeking recovery need die from addiction. Please be aware of your behavior when dealing with convention center staff and property. Our personal conduct is a direct reflection on our recovery and action. Notify committee members or convention center security if necessary. All meetings, workshops, and activities that are inside are non-smoking. Smoking is permitted outside only. Please dispose of your cigarettes properly. Clarity statement. In Narcotics Anonymous, we are presented with a dilemma. When NA members identify themselves as addicts and alcoholics or talk about being clean and sober, the clarity of the NA message is diluted. To speak in this manner suggests that there are two diseases, that one drug is separate from God, I wish I wouldn't write like this. One drug is separate from the rest. Our identification as addicts is all-inclusive, allowing us to concentrate on our similarities, not our differences. This statement is offered in the spirit of NA unity. Please remember that this request is not being made in order to rule, censor, or dictate behavior. We make this request in order to provide an atmosphere of recovery where we can all hear the clear, unconfused, life-saving message of Narcotics Anonymous. Can I get somebody to read how it works in the traditions? How it works?
Hi, I'm Judy. I'm a grateful recovering addict.
Judy.
How it works. If you want what we have to offer and are willing to make the effort to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. These are the principles that made our recovery possible. 1, when we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives become unmanageable. 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, we humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, we made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, we continue to take personal inventory, and when we are wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for His knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to addicts and to practice these principles in all our affairs. This sounds like a big order, and we can't do it all at once. We didn't become addicted in one day, so remember, easy does it. This is one thing more than anything else that will defeat us in our recovery. This is an attitude of indifference or intolerance towards spiritual principles. 3 of these that are indispensable are honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. With these, we are well on our way. We feel that our approach to the disease of addiction is completely realistic, for the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel. We feel that our way is practical, for one addict can best understand and help another addict. We believe that the sooner we face our problems within our society and everyday living, just that much faster do we become acceptable, responsible, and productive members of that society. The only way to keep from returning to active addiction is not to take that first drug. If you are like us, you know that 1 is too many and 1,000 never enough. We put great emphasis on this, for we know that when we use drugs in any form or substitute one for another, we release our addiction all over again. Thinking of alcohol as different from other drugs has caused a great many addicts to relapse. Before we came to NA, many of us viewed alcohol separately, but we cannot afford to be confused about this. Alcohol is a drug. We are people with the disease of addiction who must abstain from all drugs in order to recover.
Thank you.
Front and back. Okay. Tradition.
I'm Bruce. I'm Maddie.
Hey, Bruce.
These are 12 traditions of the We keep what we have only with vigilance. And this is critical for the individual because from the 12 steps. So the groups create more traditions. As long as the ties that bind us together are stronger than those that tear us apart, all will be well. One, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends on individual. Two, for our group purposes, there's but one ultimate authority, the living God, as he may express himself in our pure conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants that we may govern. Three, the only requirement for membership is the desire to stop using it. Four, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or NA as a whole. Five, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. Six, an NA group will never endorse, finance, or lend the NA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, or prestige diverge from our primary purpose. Seven, every NA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. Eight, Narcotics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. Nine, NA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible for those they serve. 10, Narcotics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the NA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need to always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press ratings and films. 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all traditions, ever reminding us of such principles for personalities. Understanding these traditions comes slowly over a period of time. We pick up information as we talk to members and visit various groups. It usually isn't until we get involved with service that someone points out that personal recovery depends on NA unity, and that unity depends on how well we follow our traditions. 12 traditions of NA are not negotiable. They're the guidelines that keep our fellowship alive and free. By following these guidelines and our dealings with others and society at large, we avoid many problems. That is not to say that our traditions eliminate all problems. We still have to face difficulties as they arise. Communication problems, differences of opinion, internal controversies, and troubles with individuals and groups outside the fellowship. However, when we apply these principles, we avoid some of the pitfalls. Many of our problems are like those that our predecessors had to face. Their hard-work experience gave birth to the conditions, and our own experience has shown that these principles are just as valid today as they were when these traditions were formulated. Our traditions protect us from the internal and external forces that can destroy us. They are truly the ties that bind us together. It's only through understanding and application that they work.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The topic of this workshop is mental health and recovery, and Sam is going to start us out, my brother Sam from the Piedmont area, just because I love him.
Teresa's gonna do that.
No, Teresa.
Y'all discussed that over there, didn't you?
Yeah, we had a long discussion, and she ran you under the bus. And since I've known you for the last 32 years, I'm gonna give it to you.
All right, my name's Sam. I'm an addict.
Hello, Sam.
And it's indeed an honor and a privilege to be with you today and share on this topic. My clean date is July 4th, 1986. And I don't say that for applause. I say that to let you know that I've experienced some things while being here in recovery. One of the things is that the topic about mental health. Now, we're all familiar with insanity, aren't we? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, right? Or doing the same thing over and over again, knowing what the result's going to be. All right, y'all can relate to that, right? Okay, I ain't talking about that. I ain't talking about that. See, if you haven't got it yet, and I'm not here promoting any books or anything like that, but get this book right here, all right? In it, because I was trying to look for some material, because I knew that Narcotics Anonymous had to address this at some point in time. And I know it's addressed in the basic text in a very general way, but in this book, it gets more specific. And it talks about mental illness. But it starts out in emotional and spiritual crisis, and it's on page 110. We talk a lot in the rooms and in our literature about the insanity of our addiction. And while it is quite clear that our thinking is deeply distorted by our disease, this is distinct from other forms of what professionals call mental illness. Our booklet, In Times of Illness, can be a very helpful resource for those of us struggling with mental illness and recovery. Mental illness is a real and can be very serious it is vital that we understand that while the illness itself is an outside issue that needs treatment, our struggles with mental illnesses and the way they impact our recovery are much inside issues. So I want y'all to understand that, because the reason I gave you my clean date is because when I first came in, it was total abstinence. Right? Don't use no mood, mind altering substances, correct? And if I'm not mistaken, mental health medication is a mood, mind altering substance. So I want you to understand that, we don't profess to be doctors and all that in here, but sometimes some of our fellowship gives out the wrong advice. We're here to share our experience, strength, and hope. And what's the difference about that is actually things that I've been through, things that I've done, things that I've encountered and through my life is what I want to give you today. Okay? One of the things I want you to understand is that we have a lot of members that have mental illnesses. Now, the trouble with that is, it talks about it in the basic text, is that our diagnosis is very hard to make because of certain variables. Because a lot of us, we're individuals, and we have a lot of different things going on. All our stories are not the same. They are similar, but they are not the same. And I want you to understand that for me to tell somebody that's schizophrenic that you can't take your medication, I'm doing that person some harm. That person may be actually having visual or auditory hallucinations. And I've actually had that to happen to me in a meeting from a guy that I've known in the program for quite some time, and I didn't know he was mentally ill. And but I could tell when he started acting out. And it looked something like this. I was sitting in a speakers meeting, and you ever notice somebody just glaring at you? Yeah, and I just kind of looked back, and he was just on me. You know what I'm saying? And you know what, I felt some kind of way. You know, I've been knowing for quite some time, and I didn't know what was going on, and I sit there for a few minutes, and I listened to the speaker, and after a while, I looked back again, and he was still like, and I started feeling a little icky, you know what I'm saying? And so in a minute, when I looked back, all of a sudden he jumped up, man, I'm tired of you looking at me, messing with me. I ain't taking this shit off you in the middle of the meeting. I hadn't said a word. And he stormed out the door. I said, damn, what did I do to him? But it was causes of mental illness. You understand there's things that are going on. Now, I'm going to share this with you, is that I've been in the profession of addiction recovery for about 30 years. And I've been exposed to some things that maybe the quote-unquote normal member have not been exposed to. Mental illness. This thing here is very powerful. It's very powerful. And the thing about what drugs does to it is very powerful. Drugs can hijack your brain, right? And it can cause psychosis and a whole lot of other things. That's why mental illness and addiction recovery run so closely together, because we want you to understand, we become depressed. I don't know, I went through a depression when I first got clean. What about y'all? I'm gonna jump back and forth about, hope by the end of this, all of this makes sense. But I want you to understand that if you've been doing something for a long time and all of a sudden you stop doing it, you're gonna feel some kind of way about that. Right? And I don't know about y'all, but I was always going. And all of a sudden I stopped. And I started to feel that. And then I had to return to the neighborhood once I finished treatment, and everybody else was still going. And I had to learn how to slow down and to be comfortable in that. And the meetings helped tremendously, right? But understand, my brain chemistry had to get okay, right? Years ago, they used to give treatment for a period of time, inpatient treatment. which has nothing to do with Narcotics Anonymous, but what I want you to understand is it has something to do with that time span for your brain to readjust. And what is happening in our society today, is the way I look at it, is that people are not given time, instead they're given medication. So it's important that you deal with people that are knowledgeable about addiction and recovery, and there are very few people that are knowledgeable about addiction and recovery, especially doctors. There's a lot of doctors that they treat symptoms. And if you go to them, and some of you people that use pills and all this other stuff, you know that if you present with certain symptoms, he's gonna write a script for whatever he think you need. And that's how that works. And that may not be the best thing for a recovering addict. Right? Because that can send me off on a tailspin. Now, back to this mental illness stuff. So that means that actually there's something chemically wrong in my brain that may require medication to adjust. Okay? That means that basically if I get that medication for a schizophrenic, that they don't see those hallucinations. They don't hear them people talking to them. I went to a workshop once where they actually put the visual glasses on me and they put headphones on me. And get this, it was to help me understand schizophrenia better. And the deal is that the scene on the visual, what do you call those things? Virtual reality glasses was a bus, right? So on this bus, you know there's other people talking. There's the noise of the bus, there's the noise of the crowd, there's the noise of traffic and all this kind of stuff. And then you hear this other voice say, hit him in the head. Now, I am not schizophrenic, but I heard that, and I'm trying to figure out where it came from. So what I want you to understand is, and looking into a mind briefly of a schizophrenic, it is very confusing to understand what's going on. Another thing that we run into a lot of time is bipolar disorder in these rooms. And people like going real fast, and they can either swing between two extreme poles, and they either go real fast, real manic-y, and then they have that depressive state then where they can get very suicidal. And it seems like withdrawals in a lot of cases. But it's not, it's something chemically wrong. And I had a client one time that actually had he did very well for a while, as long as he took his medication. But as soon as he got off his medication, he was back in relapse mode. So when it talks about this in Living Clean, since sometimes what we experience is a consequence of a physical condition. When we're detoxing, for example, which I've already went through pretty much, things can get pretty intense. Most of us in early recovery find that we lack a volume knob for our emotions. And that was pretty much my case, and I understand that I've heard a lot of people share in the room, that you're bouncing off the wall. I had my own diagnosis when I was going through the rooms. About 6 months, I was batshit crazy. Seriously. I mean, my using dreams were so intense that I would wake up and I would think that I had actually used. I would wake up sweating, my heart would be racing, and I'm looking for evidence that I had used. And I would sit up in a meeting when they passed out the chips and have this conversation with myself, saying, should I pick up a white chip or not? And be too afraid to talk to somebody about this for fear they may judge me. But I didn't know chemically that's what I was going through. That's what I had to go through in order to get to where I am today. And I didn't need medication to adjust that. It was just something I had to go through in order to get better. I've seen a lot of people come into the rooms and they get on medication for mental health disorders or whatever, and they start gaining a lot of weight. Because some of the medications, one of the side effects, any medication you take, you're gonna have side effects. So they start gaining weight and they get big. All of a sudden they fine and they go right past fine. I've seen it happen. And I mean, 1 week, damn, she looked good. Next week, woo!
All right now.
But I'm just saying, you know, because this could have an emotional impact on that individual.
Bring it up, fix it now.
I gotta fix it up now.
Yeah, you
All
gotta
right.
fix it.
Yeah, I gotta fix that. All right. But understand what I'm saying is that you know, there's other ways to deal with that. And with any medication, a lot of times, you know, they give other medication to treat other side effects. Right? So understand that. It's a very serious matter in the programs, and I'm glad that Narcotics Anonymous is becoming more aware. And they've taken stances on it. And, you know, I'm not a doctor, and if I was, I would be leaning more towards being an addictionologist rather than just being a regular doctor. I've had the experience of working with doctors, and it's one doctor that believed in addictionology, and where I'm from Macon, Georgia. And down in Macon, he was over the Mercer medical students, and he would have them come into the treatment facility, and they had 2 weeks to get all they could get about addiction recovery. You know, and I know, that ain't a long enough time to learn a damn thing. All they doing is getting exposed to it, but then for them to treat it, because I have been to doctors myself, and if I've had an injury or something like that, first conversation I have with my doctor is, I'm a recovering addict. And I understand that recovery is my responsibility. So when he prescribes me medication of any kind, I want to know what that medication is and what it's going to do to me and how it's going to impact my recovery. First thing I ask him is, what are the side effects? Now, this is all a little off the grid, but I had to have a colonoscopy. And I asked the doctor, and if you ain't had one, older gentleman, it's about time. Stop playing. It ain't as serious as you making it out to be, but it can be more serious than you want it to be. But when I went in, because my brother's 4 years younger than me, he said, man, you need to go ahead and have a colonoscopy. I said, man, nobody mess with the poop shoot, man. He said, boy, let me tell you something. He said, I got this female doctor I can recommend to you. She's going to treat you real good. I said, but anyway, make a long story short, what I did was I asked the doctor, because he said he had to put me under. I asked the doctor, what was he going to use to put me under? And he said, propofol. I said, what? I said, ain't that stuff that killed Michael Jackson? He said, yeah, but we ain't gonna give you that much. And me and him went ahead and we had a long conversation. And it was basically about the effects of the medication. And so understand, and the other thing that I found out, well, let me finish this, and I went through and had a colonoscopy and I didn't have any problem. And he basically explained to me why they used it and what the side effects would be and all that kind of stuff. And it was virtually nothing, right? But I think Michael Jackson was on another plane with that. He was somewhere else. But I want you to understand, people, one of the biggest things that I see that is problematic with addicts that are mental health is staying on their medication. One of the things that they do, they get to feeling better, and all of a sudden they become doctors. All of a sudden, I'm feeling good, I don't need the medication no more, I stop taking it. So when you stop taking it, your brain goes haywire, and all of a sudden, you either back out on the road or you're crazy as hell. So it's very important to treat not one, but both at the same time. I've got to treat my addiction, and I've got to treat my mental health. And that has to be done together, because I'm dealing with one person. I can't deal with half of me and then the other half. See, I have a disease that wants to kill me. And it will take any avenue possible to make that happen. If it's my mental illness, if it's relationships, if it's anything that it can use against me, it will. And that battle is ongoing. That's something that just doesn't come to a halt at 10 years, at 20 years, at 30 years or more. It keeps on. And a matter of fact, it gets more tricky, it seems to me. Yeah. It comes out in ways that you wouldn't even believe it. And next thing you know, you can identify this as obsessive compulsive behavior, which is the nature of our disease. It ain't about the dope no more. It's about living and how I treat other people. Right? As you work the steps and all that, you start to learn that, guess what? This thing starts getting better. Right? If you're actively changing. If you're not, you can be clean and crazy without being mental health. I want you to understand that. So understand that the insanity is one thing, the mental illness is another. And I'm going to let Teresa do the rest of it. Thanks for allowing me to share.
All right, I'm Teresa, I'm an addict.
Hey, Teresa.
I am so grateful for this opportunity, always an opportunity to be at a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. NA is a place where I was raised up. You know, any platform, any doors that I walked through, it was a direct result of Narcotics Anonymous. You know, I am truly, truly grateful. I am truly, truly grateful for a program that is progressive. That is progressive. Because when I got here, y'all told me the disease of addiction was too. So I'm grateful for a fellowship that could get together, and because like Sam said, it was a time a topic like this wouldn't even be on the floor. You know, I'm gonna come from the literature. There's a couple of things I want to read. One of them is that the preface of the 6th edition, right? So when I came around, my clean date is, I just made 18 years. Right. On the 13th of this month, right? Which is a miracle within itself. He's talking about mental health challenges, right? See, for real, still my mind can't even wrap around how I got 18 years, right? By just showing up one day at a time, right? When I learned how, you talking about mental health challenges, how do you learn to live one day at a time? Right, so I'm so grateful for a program that is progressive. In the 6th edition, in the prefix, I like where it says that now with the publication of the 6th edition basic text, because remember, it was some challenges even to get this published, right? So just to get a little bit of the history of the program, now with the publication of our 6th edition basic text, we can say NA has, in many respects, come to age. The process has not been without growing pains. However, from 1983 to 1988, we had 5 editions and a revision of the basic text. 4 years afterwards, the fellowship as a whole was unwilling to undertake another revision. Many of us thought we would never see the day that the new edition of the basic text could be welcomed by the fellowship. And so the publication of the 6th edition is something to celebrate and a real marker of our ability as a fellowship to grow and to change. So I don't know where everybody in here stands with this topic, right? But it's on the floor. And that's what makes it most powerful to me as a person that can still walk through a door and we can welcome the newcomer with whatever they may bring, right? I have a story. Our literature tells us in the basic text that, in Who's an Addict, it tells us that we did not choose to become addicts. We suffer from a disease that expresses itself in ways that are antisocial and that makes detection, diagnosis, and treatment difficult. Right? This is Sam book. This may be the first edition. He's been around, so that didn't change. That's a compliment, by the way. That's a compliment, by the way, right? So it says that we didn't choose to become an addict. I don't know about y'all. I didn't choose to become an addict. And then when I got here, y'all told me that using was just a symptom. So now I needed to go on a journey to find out what the hell else was going on there. If using was the symptom and the manifestation, what was the challenge? What was the challenge? And in here, when I read it at first, I thought antisocial meant I just don't want to talk to nobody. But the truth is, that is a mental health diagnosis term. Antisocial, it means in my DNA, I did not adjust. I could not make the transitions as well as other people did. Something was going on. Something was going on. And so we have these programs and we have these systems in place, like Sam said, that deals with the symptom. But NA was the only place that I was able to come to that dealt with what was really going on. And what I found out was there were some mental health challenges. So I'm going to talk about mental health challenges a little bit. Sam talked about mental illness because there is a difference. And now with the approved IP that is coming out, right? It's not approved printed, but it's approved. I'm going to read from that. And it says, I struggle with our mental illness and the way that impact our recovery are very much inside issues. They're inside issues. We need to make this distinction to ensure that we don't fail to seek additional help either because of the stigma in the rooms. In the rooms. Right? The stigma in the rooms or the confusion about relationships between mental illness and recovery. Not the confusion. Sam just talked about that. Y'all told me I had addictive behaviors before I picked up. That's what y'all told me when I got here. You told me that my addiction was between my ears. This is what y'all told me. And as I embarked on a journey of the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous, I found out that one time in my life that from age, it was 2 years, I could not remember. Absolutely memory just wiped, just could not remember it. And so I took it, I just alluded to something really, really terrible had happened, But the fact is, like our literature says, some of us withdraw physically, or some of us withdraw emotionally. Either way, it's a mental decision. I withdrew 2 years emotionally, physically from the world, but I never withdrew emotionally. So I went in the house, and I didn't come back out. I didn't come back out for 2 years. And it was a lot of things I couldn't remember, but I did remember finishing school. But for a long time, I couldn't remember the teacher, I couldn't remember the classmates, I couldn't remember nothing, because this world I had wrote off as being a place that did not accept me. Mind you, I was not using yet, physically, but mentally, I was practicing some insane behaviors, And I was glad that I was able to share some of those things. Lo and behold, during the process of the step work and the journey continues and being in recovery, I was able to uncover some things that had happened at that time. And the irony of it is, it wasn't even this bad, gory thing that I thought it was. If I would have had a diagnosis, And the IP tells us I don't need to regurgitate and get it all in depth because the common bond is that we don't want to use. So that's the thread, that's the common bond, is that we come together and we help each other stay clean a day at a time. So I went in the house and I didn't come back out. Mental health challenges. So a lot of times we deal with the symptoms, but we don't deal with the trauma. And what I realized was what was traumatic is identified by the person. What was traumatic in my life was what my recovery has afforded me was to be what my higher power has called me to be. I am so excited about that. But it was a time that was a traumatic experience for me. Because every place you went, you felt like you couldn't fit in. You felt like you didn't belong. You know, you couldn't deal with the bullying. You couldn't deal with the things that was happening in the house. We got people in this fellowship who's been touched in the wrong way, who's been molested, who's been rejected all their lives. We're talking about mental health challenges. We're talking about the things that in my life that led up to, it talks about in what's the IP of the triangle of self-deception, where we faltered. Something happened up in my life that when I used one time, I kept using. And the girlfriend next to me used one time, and she was able to stop using. Right? So now we're not talking about the symptom, which the symptom is important because the symptom is that I used dope for 14 years. Okay? That's how it manifested my mental health challenges. That I withdrew from the world because I couldn't cope with the name calling and the teasing and all that stuff. See, I couldn't deal with that. I wasn't equipped with some skills and some knowledge and some information. So I was challenged mentally. And my self-diagnosis was we gonna retreat to the house. And we gonna stay there. And what brought me back out the house was some liquid drugs, okay? Mental health challenges, I connected with something in my life that caused destruction, dereliction, degradation. I mean, that's what I connected with. Because it couldn't be with people. Although that was always a desire, right? Because you guys was my first drug. Because see, I withdrew because I couldn't connect with you guys. And when I started getting this fake courage for using, you know, I still seek the same thing. You know, this is the revelation that the steps gives you. Like the whole process of my life, I kept seeking the same thing. Before the dope, during the dope, and after the dope. Right? Until I made peace with some places in my life. And I realized, oh, I get to validate me today. You're talking about mental health challenges. I needed something outside of me. Because I was never enough. Undetected, undiagnosed, antisocial, DNA, do not adjust. So I had to find some way to cope. I'm grateful. For me, it didn't turn into mental illness. Right? Untreated. So now I find myself 40 plus years old, married with children, and I got all these mannerisms and behaviors that don't line up with the spiritual principles of Narcotics Anonymous. Because I'm still trying to figure out why I'm acting out in some ways and I ain't using. We're talking about mental health challenges. But that's just my interpretation. Like I said, I don't know nobody where I stand with this topic. You know, I think that's irrelevant. What's most important is that it is now part of the table. It is at the table. And we have an IP for it, you know. People come in our fellowship and they deal with a lot of things. They deal with a lot of stuff. And I know, you know, the rooms is not a place where, even with my background profession, is where I need to be trying to diagnose some people. I need to not, as a maybe a meeting facilitator, allow somebody to take the atmosphere of recovery in the direction that it shouldn't go in. We're not saying none of those things, but I'm grateful for a fellowship that recognizes that it needs to be talked about. At least the member needs to feel safe enough that they could bring all of them through the door. NA is growing, y'all. I am grateful for the way this program is allowing it to evolve. See, y'all told me it was a spiritual program, so that means the program is already above my pay grade. Right, and we come together, and so what this is showing is as a fellowship, we're growing. Like, how freaking cool is that? Right, and sometimes we do have to go outside and get some other information, so I'm not continually be misinformed. And then when I come back and I read the literature, and I read it different, it reveals something different. And I'm like, oh, they really was concerned. Sometimes it's the people who jack up the literature. So when I went back and read the literature, I was like, oh, okay, antisocial, that's a mental health diagnosis term. That means when you tell me to go right, I'm going left just because you told me to go right. I don't have the ability to make the adjustments, or I didn't, and so now I do. And so being in recovery for quite some time, and Sam alluded to this, then it gets a little bit more tricky. You know, and I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful for this program. I can't say it enough. I'm just so grateful that we're growing as a fellowship. You know, the program of Narcotics Anonymous, I'm forever indebted to it. You know, the little girl was able to come up out of the house. You know, and I need to say, on some days still, when I open my eyes, the debate is, how can I not get out this bed? How can I find a way to stay in the bed today? What excuse can I come up with? What rationalization can I grasp so I can just stay in this bed? But because of the program, as soon as my feet hit the floor, it's on. Right?
Okay.
And I just want to be able to you know, people need to connect. And that's what I'm glad about now. The people who struggle with mental health challenges, which I think is a vast majority of us, right? Now, for a lot of people, don't have to go into mental illness. And then we don't have to have the conversations about medication, right? And so I'm gonna say this in closing, because I don't know where I'm at, but I feel through. I think my high power has left the building. So I'm through, right?
It's time.
But I'm gonna say this, you know, when we talk about mental illness and medication assisted treatment, if I suffer from type 2 diabetes, then I need medication assistance. If I suffer from hypertension, that's medication assistance. Medication assistance is just what it says. It helps me to maintain a quality of life that I probably can't without it when taken as prescribed. Thanks for letting me share.
I'll get you a new one if you need one.
So what's
Just
this
saying.
fine?
Just saying, I'm just saying. Jeff Pneumatic. One thing before we open it up, I know we all like to hug, so that means we don't mind being a little closer together. If we can get a little closer together and allow some of the folks in the back that are standing to sit down. And then they can be a part of too. Before I open it up, I am going to read one thing because I came up in Macon with Sam, and I do remember lots of people being, and I heard them told that, hey man, you don't need to be taking that. And I made a list here, and I counted it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 in the last 32 years that are no longer with us. All 6 of them blew their brains out. Now, I don't know if it's because something was said in the meeting to them. I just know all 6 of them were schizophrenic, bipolar, and I heard things said to them. But, keeping with our 8th tradition, this comes from It Works How and Why, and it will also be written in the new IP. We do not diagnose anyone's condition or track the progress of our patients. In fact, we have no patients. We only member. Only members. Our groups do not provide professional, therapeutic, medical, legal, or psychiatric services. We are simply a fellowship of recovering addicts who meet regularly to help each other stay clean. It Works How and Why, Tradition 8. I'm not in here to talk. I'm in here to hear and listen. So I'm going to shut up, and please share, but remember it's a room full, so, be terse, succinct, as my sponsor told me. We want to know that you were kicking the dog. We want to know why you were kicking the dog, but we don't need to know all about the dog's color. We don't need to know it only had one eye. We don't need to know all. We just want to know why you're kicking the dog. So raise your hand. We'll recognize you, this young lady and then that young man.
My name's Jill, and I'm a grateful addict. I'm so sorry that I missed all that you shared, but I feel compelled to share because this is a fantastic thing that we need to talk about. I had 20 years and I went back out, and I am grateful that I'm sitting in this chair today with 3.5 years clean. Because I know what I suffer from. I suffer from a couple of things, okay? And I know where to get help, but I want to share just this one story real quick, and it makes it real clear for me. I came back into the rooms with the God of my understanding, which I choose to call God. I went to a treatment center because it was so black. I went out for 10 years. It was so black that I couldn't see. But I got to that treatment center, and they had no detox, no medication, nothing, okay? And I am bipolar, and so I trusted. And in that, he delivered me from dope, okay? But when I got home, what he said was, call the doctor because I made him for you to get help. Point blank period. So I've been around for a long, long time. I don't claim that last time, but I do today. And I've seen in the 30 years that I've been around, people diagnose other people, die over other people's stupidity, over other people saying, and I'm passionate about this, okay? We have no right to tell anybody they can or they cannot do anything except for my experience, strength, and hope about how to stay clean of dope. And then with your sponsor, whatever you choose to do other than that. Thank you for letting me share. My name is
Thank
Jewel.
you for
and I'm
sharing.
grateful.
Fair.
Hey, my name is Phil, and I'm an addict.
Hey, Phil.
I'm so grateful to be in this room. So happy to see there's a lot of people in this room. It makes me feel a lot less alone. It's hard to feel alone, and thank you both for sharing. And it's so hard to feel alone in a fellowship that made me feel less alone. You know, I had a sponsee for years, and he had suffered from bipolar, and he was ashamed of taking his medication at first. And he couldn't stay clean and work steps until he was regularly listening to the doctor and taking his medication as prescribed. And that was easy for me to say to him, Mike, like, you gotta take your meds, bro. Like, if your doctor saying you gotta take your meds, you gotta take your meds. And then we can do step work. It's not the opposite, you know? And that was easy because it was something clear as bipolar. It's a lot harder when I turn the mirror on myself for a term like clinical depression. Because there's a lot of gray area between depression and recovery from a challenge to an illness.
Right, right.
Situational depression
Right.
versus clinical depression. And the stigma in the rooms really fucked me up over it. I was terrified to seek help for it. I was terrified to even have the medication conversation about it. And after getting diagnosed by 2 mental health professionals, I decided to take the advice. And for me, and I don't speak, by the way, on behalf of NA, but myself, decided to address that illness with medication. It's changed my fucking life. And one of my doctors had told me I was doing the work of 20 fucking people. You know? And I'm just so grateful because I fucking believed this lie that I had to do step work perfectly before I even had any of those conversations. And that's bullshit. And here's the other fun fact. I do say the name of my illness because no one bats a motherfucking eye when we talk about physical illness specific names. I'm not increasing the stigma of my mental illness anymore. Because what the hell? I'm free to shout from the roofs, I'm a drug addict. I have depression. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's insane. I stole my sister's birthday money for coke. But I also can't get out of bed anymore.
Come on.
Fuck out of here. I'm good. Surviving 2 diseases, and that's totally okay. Doesn't mean I come here and diagnose people. See a doctor if you need to. It's my story. And I'm a really grateful recovering addict because this fellowship opened my eyes to that. So thanks for letting me share.
Thanks for sharing, Phil.
I'm Hank, I'm an addict.
Hey,
Hank.
Hank.
Really grateful this workshop's here. Really grateful this workshop's here. This guy didn't know it, but he was a counselor at the first treatment center I ever went to. I really disliked him.
Doing my job.
Never had like that.
Really disliked him. That was a long ass time ago. I was 15. A long time ago. You know, and I have some history with Jerusalem, so thank you guys for your sharing your experience, strength, and hope. And Jeff here probably doesn't remember, but my sponsor and I were coming back from a speaker jam in Jacksonville, and his brake line went out, and he let us kind of come by and fix his brake line so we could right, connect some of the dots, right? And so I just think about this. I think about my home group, right? My first home group that created a safe space for me to show up who I was. And all this other extreme bullshit I got exposed to after that. So I didn't have any experience with the bullshit about what I can and couldn't do. They created a space at my first home group for me to show up just the fucked up person that I was, and just to talk about all the shit that had me fucked up. And they would say, thank you for sharing. We love you. Keep coming back. Right? And so I didn't get exposed to all of this really, you know, and this is the deal. Like, how do I, like, I got my, like, I'm the expert on my own experience.
Right.
And who am I to tell you what your experience should be? Who am I to say, like, I don't have a mental health diagnosis, but you know what? Every time I went to treatment, I got one. Every time I went to treatment, I got one. And it took me some time to figure out who I was. When I got into the rooms, they said, just be you. What the fuck is that? It took me a long time. Sometimes I look around and still don't know.
Right.
Sometimes I'm coming to new realizations of who that guy is. You know? And so I'm the expert on my own experience that if we're not creating, if NA is the last house on the block with the lights on, where the fuck else am I supposed to go? Like if this is it, like nobody comes in here wanting to be here. We all come in here, I don't want to be here. Like I resisted this fellowship. I did not want to be a member of this fellowship because you said I couldn't do one.
Right.
And I could do one. Y'all couldn't do one. But I could do one. And it took me a long time to come to terms with I couldn't do one. And if NA is really the last house on the block with the lights on, and I'm looking for differences rather than similarities when I get here, because I don't want to fit in here. Only to come to find out it's the only place I've ever fit. And if I can't bring my whole self to the table, what the fuck else am I supposed to do? Right? And so for me, I had somebody ask me yesterday what my stance is on it. And you know, thank God for you. Teresa got right there. Boy, she would get right there to the line, and she would toe the line with the literature, and then she would back off. I saw her do that shit 2 times. Right? Because there are certain things like NA doesn't have, like there are certain things NA does, and there are certain things NA doesn't do in the stance as the fellowship, but as us personally, as individuals, our own personal experience, anything that affects me is worth sharing in the meeting. Anything that affects my recovery, our literature says that.
That's right.
Clearly. Anything that affects my recovery, I can share in the meeting. So, you know, I just try to just get, if like love and tolerance and like acceptance, if like that is like if like these are the spiritual principles that we profess that we do as a fellowship, like where is that? And don't I have a duty and a responsibility to carry those out? You know, I feel like I have a duty and a responsibility to carry those out. But I also know this too for people that have a ton of time and have been a part of this fellowship before it had literature and all this stuff. Like on the flip side, I understand that the predecessors fought hard for NA to stand on its own.
Right.
So there's a couple of different ways to look at this. NA worked hard to be NA. Right? They work really, really hard. And so a lot of times when we're introducing these new concepts, that shit is threatening. But we still have to maintain the atmosphere of recovery in our meetings. And so it's a balance, man.
Right.
It's a balance. And it talks about that in our literature. And you know, you can read, man, I read all kinds of shit. I read shit about like all kinds of stuff that I get interested in. Ask my wife. If I get interested about something, it's 12:30 at night. I'm scrolling. She's like, what are you doing? Research. I'm interested.
Excessive and compulsive.
You know what I'm saying? I'm interested. I want to know. You know, and so for me, man, I'm just like grateful to be here. I'm grateful, like Teresa said, like Sam said, that we're having this conversation. Like Jeff said, that we're even introducing this conversation. It's a very real thing, man. It's a very real thing. So I'm just grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Young lady right here. in
Family,
front.
my name's Lynn. I'm grateful to recover Abby.
Hey.
I always thank God I'm out of bed for another big clean and serene. And you know what? I remember coming out of prison in '94 and going into a program and somebody telling me that they had me on poison, that I shouldn't take the medication.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying? But thank God it was somebody that been around a while that told me you need to go to your doctor. If it's doing this, then you ought to ask him, you know, if you can take her down or something, you know? And that was the suggestion that I got. You know, for me, a sponsor is a serene person offered a newcomer suggestions of recovery. They don't have a PhD behind their name, not no doctor, not my doctor. You know what I'm saying? So I have to go to other people to help me outside the fellowship. You know, in my area, I remember a young man taking this stuff, killing himself. Because when they tell him on his medication, you know, in the rooms. You know? And that ain't cool. It's not cool at all, you know? I'm here to direct my spousees through the steps. You know what I'm saying? Traditions and concepts. You know, I can't be a doctor for them because I don't have devices for that. And I would not do that. You know, I today, and it's not another illness, but I suffer from epilepsy. And my brain doesn't click right. You know, sometimes I can be talking and I get lost in a sentence, you know? And I have a sponsor tell me, I call her one night, she told me, you gotta get off that medication. I said, yeah, so what? I go and kill somebody the next day. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause you can't do that. You know, I know what it's like to be up by a high the will and have a fucking seizure and almost kill somebody. You know, clean it. You know, so for me, you know, this program, and no, let me go back and say this real quick. I'm so glad you're talking about entitled illness, you know, and stuff like that, because for some reason, some IPs we just skip over. We don't talk about them in meetings, we don't bring them out, they're not a topic, we skip over them, you know? And for my help, if I say, like, you guys need to get entitled illness, you need to get this, you need to get that, because we need to talk about this stuff. You know, and it's very important. Because I don't think any of us came into this room first. We suffer from something. You know, so, I wanna thank you guys both for sharing. Cause you opened my eyes to a lot too, you know what I'm saying? So thank you for sharing. And thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you for
Thank
sharing.
you, Sharon. Young lady here, right here, and then you, her
My name is
first.
Susan, and I'm an addict.
Hey, Susan.
Thank you both for sharing. I totally, oh my God, I got teared up when you were sharing because I relate to your story so much on so many levels. I can remember, I have a bipolar diagnosis, and when I saw mental health on this little thing, I was like, that's for me. But you know, when I first got my diagnosis, my first thought was, I already had my addiction. I knew this. But when they said bipolar, that's why I'm an addict. That's why all these years you know, that's why I've done what I did. So I looked through my cure through psychiatry. I didn't embrace them together as one. And I think this time around, I've got 17 months.
Yeah.
All right.
But I totally embraced the bipolar side of me. I love the bipolar side of me. Used to when I would have the manic episodes, it was freed up, you know, because I would be and then we would buy dogs that we didn't need, and we would have, you know, I bought a house that I don't remember getting.
That's what happened. I went to college, I did all that, I didn't remember none of that.
I literally came to from a blackout, a manic episode with a brand new house, no job. I had no job.
It happens, that's right.
And it was like, and then the depression hit.
Yeah.
And then I used, because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to bring both of these two together and be okay. I'm okay with my bipolar, you know, and I share that with anybody because I'm not ashamed of it anymore, you know. I don't think it's the reason why I'm the other anymore. And the meetings helps my bipolar. The fellowships help my bipolar. They go hand in hand. And I got a book, and I found out about my bipolar. I got a book called Bipolar for Dummies. And I read that shit, and I know I know not to make a decision. I know when somebody asks me something, don't just say yes, because I usually say yes to something I'm gonna regret later. And so I embrace both of them together, and I have a sponsor that knows about bipolar disorder, and I can share that with her, and it's working for me, and I'm okay with who I am today with both of these challenges, and they're not challenges anymore, cause I like who I am. I can look in the mirror and be like, you're all right, you know, you're all right. But, I'm glad y'all had this workshop. Thank you so much.
Thank you, great.
Thanks, Susie.
I'm Mitch, I'm an addict.
Yes.
And, I mean, for me, you know, I separate them because a long time before I ever accepted I knew I was bipolar. This matches up so good with aging and recovery. 94 to 2016, I found the perfect medication. It really just wasn't an issue. But it started messing with my liver, so they had to take me off. Then it became an issue for everybody.
Hey.
And, you know, an issue. The cool thing is, there was really nothing else. That was the last optional medication I've been trying since the 80s. And that was the perfect medication. They just didn't have anything else. You know, it took me, you know, and I hate it. It took me using and going to the hospital and saying, okay, yeah, find something. And they just recently came out with something that worked. You know, I ain't perfect. And medication ain't the only solution. I have to have medication in 12 steps.
Right.
You know, it don't do everything. It ain't no miracle. But it does take me out of neutral running 120 and put me back in drive. I can put a car reverse drive and get it in different gears. If I don't have that outside thing, it's in neutral again, I'm 120 and I can't hear you over the spinal tires. But it's good to be able to hear me and understand and stay on top. It's a good deal. Thanks.
Thanks, Nate.
I'm Teresa, I'm an addict. I just want to say one thing that I remembered was the name that they gave to this IP. Again, I'm just so grateful because they use mental health and recovery, not N-I-N, not and, A-N-D. So now it's not this and that, it's in recovery. So we're just grateful for Gretna again for stirring up this topic in these conversations.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Hey, John.
I hate having the workshop late and speak, but I wanted to go to this one to start with, but I had got the room mixed up or whatever. So anyway, I have bipolar disorder too, and it's really a challenge. I'm a computer programmer by trade, and I would go through these manic episodes, and I would be like a superstar and implement these projects and work on these projects that save the company millions of dollars, stuff like that, and you get high praise and all this stuff. And then there was the down times, and then there was the times where I couldn't function. I couldn't, you know, I had deaths in my family and all this stuff, and I was just so depressed I couldn't work. And so the company was on. I was getting ready to be fired in 30 days, you know, and they gave me this ridiculous project to work on, knowing I couldn't do it. And so it came down to it. My doctor took me out of work for bipolar disorder, and that was over 10 years ago, and I haven't been able to work since. And that my whole identity was wrapped up in my career and the money, not to say the money that my family was used to. And so, you know, we took like a 3/4 drop in income, bankrupt, almost lost our house, you know, all these different things. Had my luxury SUV repoed, had our hot tub, our $12,000 hot tub repoed, and that was one of those mania buys, you know, who in the hell needs a hot tub like that?
I was thinking the same thing.
Good NA parties, that's for sure. But anyway, I just, like I said, I'm grateful they are having this workshop too, and I'm glad to see this new literature coming out. And, you know, I have never felt like people were against me when I had this disease, or have this disease. When I share about it, you know, gratefully, you know, people around me had open minds, you know, realizing hell of a lot of getting used to, you know, and I still have the manias. I get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. I work till 9 o'clock at night, doing all kinds of crap, you know, and being remodeling and doing great things. Look fabulous, you know, but